welcome Mr. Begell as our speaker today. He's going to tell us about journal publishing and tell us how it differs from book publishing. Mr. Begell is president of Hemisphere Publishing Corporation. He's also the chairman of the AAP Committee on Professional and Scholarly Publishing. During his talk, I think he'll tell you a little more about himself, too. Mr. Begell?
Good morning. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you, Ms. Collins, for nice words of introduction. I think it's a rare opportunity to speak to a group of librarians to whom you give your things for free and pay for it. I'm pleased to be here, and I will tell you all I know about journals that I want to tell you. There are some things that we'll keep to ourselves. The interesting things about journals is that they differ from books in many, many respects. And I'll try to tell you all about it so you'll understand that when you get deposit copies of journals, that there is much more going on behind than shows on the cover. I will not read my speech. I have no prepared speech. Jesus, it's so wet. I didn't expect to show that I'm all wet. Since we're being taped, I can't tell any dirty jokes, so my speech will probably have to be cut short. Coming down on the shuttle from New York, I did the New York Times crossword puzzle in pen. That's New York publisher for you. I miss a 17-letter word for minx. Anybody can solve it for me, I'll be very grateful. There are two ways of presenting a lecture. You can either read it or you can speak extemporaneously. Those who read it have prepared themselves very thoroughly. Those who speak extemporaneously have also prepared themselves very thoroughly. But I think I know enough about publishing to not to have to read except small portions of which I'll tell you. This reminds me of a story. The Pope was making a speech. It's not a Polish joke. The Pope was making a speech around Christmas time. By the way, I can tell Polish jokes because I am Polish. Around Christmas time, and many thousands of faithful have gathered in St. Peter's Square, and the Pope took his speech and spoke to the microphone and said, "Leon, Leon," and quickly one of the cardinals came to him, took the piece of paper, turned it around, and said, "Please go on." And of course it was Noel, Noel. I'm not really Bill Begell here. I remember the record that Mark played you last time he was here. The, what was it? The Thurber, yeah. Really, there was something about Leslie's Weekly. Remember? It went out of business. It's not true. Journals survive, believe me. I know because I've been in the business for about 20 years. I started out as a nuclear engineer, believe it or not. I was working on thinking about the unthinkable. 20 years ago, almost 25 years ago, I was in charge of a group of engineers at Columbia University thinking what will happen if a thermohydraulic accident occurs in a nuclear reactor. Well, it did happen at 3 Mile Island. But by that time, somebody had discovered that I speak Russian, because Polish and Russian are my native languages, and involved me in translation business. After having been involved in translation business, I was exposed to printer's ink, and that's like dope. So here I am in publishers 20 years later. Hemisphere publishes about 20 journals. We'll be publishing 22 journals starting in 1983. So over the years, I've been exposed to many types of journal publishing and also book publishing. So I'm trying to lead you into the situation that I know a bit about journal publishing. I know about scholarly publishing, because this is the area with which we deal. And to give you an idea what kind of publishing I'm involved in, I'm mostly involved in what we in the publishing lore call short-run publishing. Now, what is short-run publishing? I think the shortest-run publishing is a wedding picture album or a bar mitzvah or whatever. Then, if you speak to people at McGraw-Hill in their college division, they'll say that short-run publishing means a printing of 30,000 copies, because their colleagues in some professional or trade divisions may have a printing of 30 or 50,000 copies, or 50 or 100,000 copies at one time. Well, we publish journals and books that may sell on today's market anywhere from 600-700 copies and up. This is short-run publishing. It used to be that one could publish anything, scientific or scholarly, and sell at least 2,000 copies, minus 2 that you had to deposit in copyright. Today, because of the economic conditions, you cannot sell 2,000 copies anymore. You sell 600 or 700 or 800 copies. If you're lucky with scholarly and engineering monographs, you can sell 12 or 1,500. Journals are really a fascinating area to publish because they're alive. They're truly a fluid, living entity. At one time, somebody in the Library of Congress told me that a journal can do everything that a human being can do on a sociological basis. And at one time, I had prepared a list of what can happen to a journal. So again, to introduce you to the spirit of journal publishing, let me read to you what can happen to a journal. A journal gets born. It has parents. It has genes. It gets baptized. It goes through infancy, youth. It can get adopted, get foster parents. It can run away from home. It grows. It reaches maturity. It gets married, changes name. It has children, sometimes illegitimate. It gets divorced, with or without bitter lawsuits. It gets remarried, engages in hanky-panky, gets sick, gets better, can undergo surgery, analysis, has emotional problems, can hibernate for a while, can wake up. It runs faster, slower, it engages in politics, becomes famous, wins awards, becomes infamous, gets arrested, engages in quarrels, disputes, differences of opinion, becomes enslaved, gets liberated, sells itself. On the other hand, it can be either faithful or promiscuous. It gets old and senile. It gets rejuvenated, it changes image, can undergo plastic surgery. It can be promoted, demoted, and be rich and make money, or be poor and lose money. It can have more children. It can commit bigamy. It can get heavy or thin. Finally, it can die. But the journal has a godly feature. It can be resurrected. Now, most of all, and as all of you know, a journal needs tender, loving care. By the way, all these explanations are available from me on a subscription basis, and with all subscriptions, payment in advance. I have to be careful what I say because Big Brother there is watching me. This leads me to an introduction of a handbook that two of my friends and I are putting together on journal publishing. This handbook really arose out of many, many meetings that I ran on journals under various auspices. And every time we speak about journals, the auditorium is filled to the hilt. Therefore, there is some tremendous interest, and we decided to put together a handbook which speaks about journal publishing. It's sort of a how-to handbook. Now, I will read to you what I call the raison d'etre for publishing that handbook. We started out by saying that a journal is not really a stretched out book, as many people say. One of the editors said it at the recent lunch. The way it primarily differs from a book, the other editor said over a sushi plate, is that the publishing of a journal is a continuous process as opposed to book publishing, which is a batch process. Now, it's the specificity of journal publishing and of running a journal publishing house and the publishing community's interest and fascination with journals that has prompted the three of us to put together a handbook. Now, facts speak for themselves. Ulrichs, or whichever way you pronounce it, the Journal Publishing Encyclopedia lists over 90,000 journals being published by over 60,000 journal publishers throughout the world. It's staggering, really. Ulrich also tells us that about 10,000 new journals are started each year and that almost 7,000 cease publication. Well, at the same time, it's a net gain of about 3,000 journal titles per annum. Disregarding the few international journal publishing giants such as Pergamon and Springer and Elsevier, who publish 150, 200, 250, 300 journals each. These statistics show that journal publishing is a highly scattered business, with each of the publishers issuing an average of 1.5 journals per house. It is therefore not at all surprising that whenever the present editors, meaning my two friends and I, by the way, they are Mr. Alan Whitman, who until the 1st of September was the journal publisher at Wiley. He now became the president of professional division of Macmillan, and Anne Reinke, who's the journal publisher at MIT Press. Now really, Alan and I thought that we'll get ourselves a very nice lady to help us with journal publishing, and that we'll sit back and she'll do all the work. Well, she's some smart lady, believe me. She's sitting back and we're doing all the work. Okay, it is not at all surprising, as I told you before, that whenever we have organized workshops, seminars, courses, or meetings dealing with journals, the attendance has always been record-breaking. Obviously, people are hungry for information from the professionals. Now, who are the people who attend these meetings and want to know about the journals, and who are the professionals, and what information do they want? I am sure that among them, the librarians figure very, very heavily, in addition to those who would want to publish journals in the future and who are publishing journals right now. After all, if the auditoria are packed, people think that maybe Pergamon, or maybe the speaker from Elsevier, or maybe from Hemisphere knows something about fulfillment or production, or some other aspect of dealing with the editors, or proofreaders, or copy editors. They may know something that we don't know, or they may have a genius on their staff who has been able to cut costs down by 0.5%. 0.5% on 300 journals, or even on one journal, is a lot of money. The information that we'll assemble in this handbook is essentially an answer to the multitude of questions those engaged in journal publishing and journal publishers to be are asking those who are in the thick of journal production: journal marketing, journal fulfillment, and journal creation. How do I is the question we'll seek to answer in that handbook. We have organized the handbook to reflect the information starting from how do I start a journal, and I'll try to speak about that today, to how do I account to the fiscal people for back issue sale. What we'll try to do is provide a hands-on information to those seeking basic knowledge of running a single journal operation, and to those who would like a more sophisticated, perhaps computer-based, industry-wide view of publishing, what is called in the publishing industry a stable of journals. You don't call it a group of journals, you don't call it a bevy of journals, you call it a stable of journals. I don't know why. We believe that the market, as I said before, is not only the 60,000 publishers and the employees of those publishing houses who publish 90,000 journals, but also those who try each year and those who will try each year. The journal, as I said before, is not a book, and neither it is a magazine. To test whether a journal or a publication is a journal or a magazine, the best way of testing is to ask the publisher. The publisher will tell you whether they publish a magazine or a journal. But the answer should be looked for. If they tell you that they publish a book, then you know that they publish a magazine. It sounds crazy, but that's true. Magazine publishers do not call their product a magazine, nor do they call it a journal. They say, we are working on the book. So that's a good test if you want to find out whether somebody's publishing a journal or a magazine. We will not deal with magazine publishing in the handbook, nor will I speak about magazine publishing today. I may mention that some so-called hybrid journals are available on the market, which are half journals and half magazines. They contain some advertising, and they are run more like Time, let's say. Time is a magazine, Newsweek is a magazine, Playboy is a magazine, etc. Well, I started by saying that the basic difference between a book and a journal is the batch versus continuous process. And here my engineering background will come across, because I will speak in terms of industrial processes. Now, a batch process is usually an industrial operation in which literally a batch of starting material is mixed, let's say in a kettle, and it's processed, dried, painted, packaged, and delivered to the customers. In household terms, baking a cake is a good example. Each time a new batch of flour is needed, you add sugar and spice and all sorts of goodies, put fruit on top and chocolate. Wow. And you finish a batch in a cake. Each cake and each book is a separate entity. It has a different author, it has a different editor, it has a different size and a different print run, it has a different jacket, and it's got a different design. The type is different. It is mixed and created within the publishing house as a separate item with its own ISBN, and it is sold primarily on its own merits. Not so with journals. The journal is not sold on the basis of one issue or one cover or one design or the contents of one issue. It is sold on the basis of the journal as a fluid entity. And journals, on the other hand, are produced by a continuous process. And again, industrially speaking, a continuous process is one where a steady stream of starting material. By the way, I think I'm the best engineer among publishers and the best publisher among engineers, and that puts me in a unique position of being able to talk about these things and sort of speaking with a forked tongue. So a continuous process is one where a steady stream of starting material is fed into the initial stage, and the final product emerges continuously from the last stage of the production line. A good and timely example is a petroleum refinery, where crude oil is introduced to the inlet of a cracking tower and refined products such as gasoline flow out from the outlet. Fluidity is generally a good description of a continuous process, and journals are essentially fluid. Not in the least, the financial aspects of journal publishing can be described by fluidity, namely cash flow, or cash velocity as some prefer to call it. And money which is paid ahead, as opposed to a book where sometimes the publishers or bookstores do not pay their bills for these days 60, 90, or 120, or 6 months or more. The journal subscription prepaid requirement presents a very tasty morsel to financial publishing managers. And by the way, the financial publishing managers will read our handbook, I hope, in droves. The fluid or continuous aspect of journal publishing can be simplistically represented by steady flow of manuscript from the journal's editor. And I speak here about engineering and scholarly journals. both in the exact and social sciences, through the internal workings, so to say, of a production manufacturing team within the publishing house or a society, and emerge through the fulfillment operation to reach the same subscriber at a predetermined periodicity, if you're lucky. This continuous line operation can be designed and run efficiently or not, profitably or not, is short, professionally or not. Just as the refinery is a complex conglomerate of chemical and physical apparatus, where the parts and stages are interlinked with each other, so in the operation of journal publishing, the various stages are connected with each other, and some actions trigger other actions, and some responses require other responses. It is a complex piece of machinery that can be made to operate efficiently and professionally. This is why we have chosen to devote a special part of this handbook to system analysis of journal publishing, to show, and I believe for the first time, the various trigger mechanisms, interlinkages, and feedbacks that constitute the internal workings of a journal publishing operation. The analysis breaks down the operation into logical basic units or cycles and takes the reader or the listener through an overview of the relationships that exist among the various how-to selections in the handbook. For example, I will define 6 cycles, and if I may, I will draw them on the board and continue speaking at the same time. The first one is the evaluative or creative cycle. Not bad. Now, what happens here? The editor of the journal gets an article from an author. He sends it out to another scientist for peer review. Then he gets it back. He sends it back to the author to be corrected, and finally sends it to the publishing house. Until that point in scholarly publishing, the publisher does not get involved at all with the publishing process. It is all the editor. Oh, true, the publisher supports the editorial operation, the scientific editor's operation, who's usually some professor at the university or professional at a large industrial or small industrial enterprise, pays for postage, secretarial help, and filing expenses, and what have you, but it is usually done on a outhouse basis. The second cycle is the what we call the redactory and production cycle. Can you see that? Now, there is communication between cycle number 1 and cycle number 2 in mere physical transmittal of articles. There is also flow back of information from the redactory production cycle. Copy editor has questions. In-house editor has questions. The questions are transmitted either directly to the author, who essentially is included, even though it's probably a completely different entity. And there is an awful lot of communication between the redactory and the production cycle. Now, in the production cycle, we, as I said before, include the copy editor, the typesetter, and the proofreader. And then we go to the third cycle, which is the manufacturing cycle. Now, you will notice that so far, essentially, with the exception of the communication between the editor and the author, it is more or less like a book, except it is happening all the time. Articles keep flowing from the editor to the copy editor, to the proofreaders, to the typesetters, and at a continuous stream, rather than, as with a book, the batch of flour is being delivered, and then you essentially forget about the author, or try to forget about the author. Now comes the true publishing area, and that is the fulfillment cycle. I hope I have my L's correct. And what does the fulfillment cycle consist of? The fulfillment cycle consists of billing, mailing, subscription or subscriber service, and essentially storage. Very frequently, the initial mailing of journals is done directly from the manufacturers, and I would say that once they delivered the initial printing of a journal issue, there is no more communication between manufacturing and fulfillment at all. Now, fulfillment, of course, goes to the king. How's that? The subscriber. And we try to treat the subscriber really as a king. There is feedback from the subscriber to the fulfillment people. I haven't received my last issue. Somebody stole the issue from the library. I need a replacement. I need an issue of 2 years ago that deals with a topic that I'm just now beginning to cover in my research, and 100 different other areas where communication between the outside subscriber and the publisher becomes important. Of course, we hope that they do not Xerox copies of our journals, because that hurts us very much. I didn't come here to make a political speech, by the way. Now, how do we let the king know that a journal exists? We need another specific publishing operation, and that's cycle 5. And we call it marketing. Now, marketing interreacts with the following areas or cycles within the publishing house. It interreacts with the redactory and production people, because they have to know whether the journal is on time, whether we can start promoting next year's journals to find out whether we have an article glut or whether we're lacking articles, because some editors after a while begin to slip and there are no articles to produce. So when you in the library see that a journal is late, it is not because the publisher is at fault. Of course the publisher is at fault, but it's some area in here which may have difficulty in producing the journal on time. It may be the supply of articles, it may be typesetting, it may be manufacturing, it may be fulfillment. Very frequently, however, it is the flow of articles from the authors to the editor. So there is a communication between marketing and production. There is also communication, or there should be, between the editor and marketing. The editor may be planning a special issue, description of the 3 Mile Island accident, let's say in an engineering journal, or some new discovery in computers, or some new discovery in genetic engineering, whatever the topic of the journal. And the marketing people should know about it long in advance. By the way, the total cycle differs. For a quarterly journal, it's about 6 months. For a monthly journal, it's about 4 months. And for bi-monthly journal, it's someplace in between in terms of the time that elapses between the receipt of the manuscript in the publishing house to the time that the subscriber receives that. So there is an awful lot of communication both ways between the evaluative, creative stage of journal publishing and the redactory production part of journal publishing, and marketing. Now, of course, marketing must communicate back and forth with the fulfillment people to really know whether journals are on time and to know what the demographics of subscription are. Who is it that subscribes to the journals? Are they mostly libraries? Are they mostly individuals? Are they people in the United States, or are they subscribers outside the United States? By the way, in scholarly publishing, it is about a 50-50 split between U.S. and foreign subscriptions. When I say 50-50, it's not exactly. It depends on how strong the dollar is and what the economic situation in a given country is at any given time. For example, right now, Germany is going through a terrible fiscal problem, an economic problem, and subscriptions to Germany will probably fall off by maybe 50%. In Great Britain, they have fallen off quite a while ago, and in addition to it, the free copies of articles that National Lending Library in Boston Spa is providing to anyone for a very measly price is not helping us with subscriptions in the UK. The next cycle is a very important one, and it's called the agency. The subscription agency, the EBSCOs and the Faxons, etc., who deal with the subscriber and then deal with publishing fulfillment people. Now, the marketing is trying to reach the subscriber, And what is interesting in journal publishing is that the subscriber is a scholar himself, and he is the author, or she. So we have really an incestuous relationship in scholarly journal publishing, where the community that you serve is both your client and a supplier at the same time. And when you, as a publisher, an acquisitions editor, anyone working in a publishing house, goes out to try and get someone to start a journal, you might as well try or write an article for your journal. You might as well at the same time try and sell them a subscription. And this is why I said that this is a closed, vicious circle. But it's interesting because you can do all your shopping in sort of a department store. This is why publishers attend so heavily professional meetings and send a lot of people all over the world to stand at these booths and try to corner as many people as possible, because they are grabbing an author, they're grabbing a subscriber, and they're at the same time maybe getting an author. Is that a secret? At the same time, once you start a journal, there will be a tremendous amount of benefit to the publishing house from additional publications that will emanate from the journal. There will be ten-year indexes that librarians love. There will be handbooks. There will be reprints. The best of numerical chemistry over the last 25 years. There will be festschrifts to honor some famous guy who retires or who reaches 60th or 65th birthday. I'm sure that all of you have seen these issues and you don't know what to do with them and how to catalog them and how to classify them. Well, we don't do it on purpose, but we're trying to make each innovation as different as possible, so that our primary author, our primary, you see, even I make mistake in speaking about the subscriber. I think of him or her as an author or a subscriber interchangeably, so that the primary subscriber doesn't really know what they're getting. Looks new, put it in different covers. You don't, is it a part of the journal? Is it a part of the serial? No, it isn't. And yet it is. It has the same editor, it has the same publisher. What about the ISBN number? What about the ISSN number? Believe me, we're not doing that to drive you librarians crazy, but we do it to sell copies. This much for the general organization of a publishing house, and I wonder whether this would not be a good time, before I continue speaking, to let me rest for a few minutes, and we'll proceed in about, what, a few minutes? Thank you.
10 minutes break.
Everybody in? Okay. By the way, I forgot to draw a picture of the publisher himself or herself in the flow chart. And the publisher really is right here. And is a juggler. Our job is to juggle all these cycles and problems and solve all the problems that arise. And there is a true multitude of problems that arise like in any other human condition, but more so. It seems that people who have printer's ink in their veins have a greater propensity to be selfish or egotistical and defend their rights and controls than any other group of people that I have known. It's been said that publishers are staying in business and getting people to work for them for very little money, meaning authors, primarily because the authors love to see their name in print. And I think that's true of everyone. There's only one thing that people like to see more in print than their name, and that's their picture. Now, this will explain why on 90% or more of books, the back cover of a jacket has a picture of the author. We as publishers would probably find much more advantageous things to put on the back of a jacket than a picture of the author. I don't think it sells books. I think we can advertise similar books. We can advertise whatever. We can sell the space to other publishers to be innovative. But you can't get away. The author wants to have his or her picture on the back. So they go to very expensive photographers and spend a lot of money. The authors spend the money. They may send occasionally a bill to you as a publisher, but this is what happens. We deal with a very, very sophisticated, tense group of people. I just witnessed that because I came back from Frankfurt, which is a madhouse. You, of course, know what Frankfurt is. It's the International Book Fair. Who knows how many publishers exhibit? I don't have the numbers, probably 10,000. There are 7 tremendous halls filled with exhibits, and the number of books exhibited is really unbelievable. If any of you has been to ALA or ABA, it's 10 times as big. And all the publishers are running around trying to make deals, sell distribution rights, buy distribution rights. They have no money, and yet the deals that are being made are tremendous. I don't know when they come back home whether their fiscal officers are killing them or not, but the kind of deals that are made are really fantastic. And everybody comes to Frankfurt because it's not to be in Frankfurt is a very improper thing to do. It will show competition that you are not in anymore. And being in Frankfurt is very important because if you are not invited to certain parties, it shows that you're out. You have to be invited to, well, just to mention some, to a McGraw-Hill party or to a Wiley party or to a Springer afternoon party. If you're not invited to the Springer afternoon party, you don't count in scholarly publishing. Well, the one-upmanship is to be invited to the Springer party and refuse. I did it this year. One thing about having it taped, because usually when you speak to a group of people, you can say, I'm going to tell you a story, and if you quote me, I'll swear you're liars. But now you've got it out. Let's create a journal. Where do we start? It seems that every possible topic has been taken. How many? 60, 90,000 journals. Well, you have to watch. You have to watch and talk to people who are in the field. If you're a scholarly publisher, as I am, well, I'm not a scholarly publisher, I'm a publisher of scholarly books and journals. If you look at chemistry, and you look at physics, you better believe that all the journals in chemistry and physics are being published either by the Germans or the French or the American Chemical Society or the American Institute of Physics. So don't look for a journal in chemistry or physics or any other basic science. What happens in interdisciplinary areas? Let's say chemistry and biology. Biochemistry. That's a good topic. Taken. Forget about biochemistry. Well, does everyone here know about the twigging phenomena? Okay. We have chemistry, which is a tree. We have a large twig, a large branch, which may be analytical chemistry. And then from analytical chemistry, we go to analytic organic chemistry, analytic physical chemistry, analytical inorganic chemistry, and so forth. And then from organic chemistry, analytical organic chemistry, you may have instrumental analysis, and from instrumental analysis, you may have computerized instrumental analysis, and so forth down the line. Now, as time goes on, these branches and these twigs grow and in themselves become trees or basic sciences. So the reason why journals grow as rapidly as they do and reach the 90 or 93,000 level is because sciences grow much faster today than they did before. The way to find a journal is to latch on to a group of people that is working in a new area. And the new area does not necessarily have to be at some sort of a branch over here. It may be a completely independent area, such as development of new techniques in mathematics, such as numerical methods. Let's pick a topic. Now, numerical methods may have an application in just about every area of science and engineering. Nobody wants to publish a journal in numerical methods and canvass the entire chemical community and the entire physics community and the entire engineering community to find the 10 people in each area who may be interested in application of numerical methods to their discipline. It would be economic insanity and suicide to send an announcement of a new journal in numerical methods to 150,000 chemists to get 2 subscriptions, or to 50,000 physicists to get 5 subscriptions. You therefore have to latch on to people who promote numerical methods to specific areas of science and engineering. For example, you may find that numerical methods are of great importance in, let's pick hydrodynamics, because with the development of computers, they can now use numerical methods much more profitably than they could do before computers were developed. And you latch on to the fact that hydrodynamicists do use numerical methods in larger numbers than 5 and 10 that I mentioned before. And as a matter of fact, at the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, for the last 3 years, a group of engineers dealing with hydrodynamics has been meeting and has been discussing application of numerical methods. This is the time to start a journal. A journal will help to create a new science, just as the new science has helped to create a new journal. It is again this incestuous relationship. Once you have a journal, they may even be a small section of a society that is formed called Numerical Methods in Hydrodynamics. This group may secede after a while from the Chemical Society or the Engineering Society, or it may become, rather than an interdisciplinary area, it may become what we call a cross-disciplinary area. In other words, this society or the group of people will draw upon its membership and readers from chemists, from physicists, from engineers, chemical engineers, mechanical engineers, nuclear engineers, everyone who is interested in solving flow or hydrodynamic problems using numerical methods. This is why you get all these crazy titles coming to the library. Diseases of the left nostril. Numerical hydrodynamics, etc., etc. But this is the way to start. Now, when you start and you have enough faith that the subject will grow, you will probably start with 50 subscriptions. The first subscription invariably coming from Boston Spa, in the UK, because they want to sell copies. And it grows. If you're lucky, you may latch on to an area where within a year you may have 500 or 600 subscriptions. And if you charge $100 a year for a quarterly, let's say in some medical sciences or engineering sciences, and if you are a small enough publisher without a very large overhead, you can make a living. If you sell 600 subscriptions at $100, after a while, you're hoping that it'll reach 1,000. We have started the journal recently in an area such as this. We've started the journal in electron microscopy, which until now was a part of pathology. They didn't differentiate between the use of light microscopes or electron microscopes. Now the techniques are difficult enough or different enough so that a journal started out. We have 800 subscribers. We deposit it with you very religiously. And we think that before long, each and every hospital in the world will replace its light microscope with a scanning electron microscope, and our subscriptions may go to 5,000. And this is, of course, the hope of every publisher, because after the first copy, all you're essentially selling is paper. And that's where the greed takes over. Isn't it wonderful to sell paper for $100 a year? This is the way to start a journal, by looking into the cross-disciplinary areas, because the basic scholarly areas are all taken. Journals in English are essentially a relatively new occurrence. Until the end of World War II or beginning of World War II, only the French and the Germans were publishing a lot of scientific journals. There were very few journals coming out of the United States. Some were coming out from the Royal Society in the UK. And every PhD in the United States had to learn and pass examinations in French or German to be able to demonstrate to the professors, to his examiners, her examiners, that they can read foreign journals, because otherwise you could not do any graduate work without knowledge of either French or German. Later on, Russian was added to it. Right now, after World War II, English became the primary language of science, and you no longer have the requirements to know French or German or Russian. You can get your graduate degrees without this knowledge. Now, the spread of English as the language of science, plus the proliferation and tremendous increase in the various sciences that exist, have all promoted the growth of journals that I have described. Now, let's say you do have this great idea to start a journal in numerical hydrodynamics. You then must choose your editor, because your editor and editorial board will determine whether you succeed or fail. Your editor must be an energetic individual. He must know everyone in the field. He must be the head of a mafia in the field, or you must help him to become the head of a mafia in the field. You convene meetings of editorial boards, you convene banquets, you spend money lavishly, usually at conventions, and people would very happily join an editorial board. Again, to become part of the ruling circle in a given area, and two, to again see their name in print. Once you assemble an editorial board, and that's not such an easy job, because you must give proper weight not only to knowledge, I must say, but also to geographic distribution. You cannot have more Japanese, even though they may know more about numerical hydrodynamics on your board, than you have British people. They will certainly object to that, unless the journal originates in Japan. Or you cannot have more Russians than you have Americans, or you cannot have more people from California than you have from the East Coast. It is a real juggling operation to provide, to assemble an editorial board. Now the editorial board cannot be too big. It's the easiest thing to put the 50 people who are at a given time when you're starting a journal, specialists in the field, and they will all submit articles, and they'll all buy the journal, and their libraries will buy the journal. And of course, they will not buy the journal because the people on the editorial board will want to get it for free. So in starting a journal, you must have a very, very careful balance, and it has to be done on marketing and human basis, and the selection must be very careful. Now, once you agree to start a journal with an editor, you must remember that you're giving this editor a tremendously powerful seat and tool within his scientific community. As long as the journal is not very strong, and as long as the journal is a beginning operation, it is not his strength, of the editor's strength and power are not as evident as after a while. In the beginning, he literally must beg his peers, please submit the article to me rather than to some well-established journal. And people will be reluctant to do it. They'll say, well, I would rather submit a journal published by American Institute of Physics, where I'll get an exposure to 5,000 readers. What can you offer me? Oh, maybe 50, maybe 100 subscribers? No, I'm not interested. So you have to twist their arms and cajole and wind them and dine them. After a while, the situation is reversed. The journal grows, it's successful. People try to get their articles published in your journal, and the rejection rate becomes much greater. A successful journal is one where the rejection rate is about 50%. Now, if you are one of two people whose article is submitted and accepted to a journal, you feel pretty proud, because in starting a journal, the standards must be exceedingly high. I would not recommend starting a journal where the peer review is lousy, or that you accept everything which is submitted to you. You want to become a scientifically discriminating entity. And if you are establishing your new journal on the basis of scientific selectivity and very strict peer review, chances are, provided you selected a good subject, that you will succeed. It takes a long time, but you will succeed. And this is where the power is, because it is the editor who can, after a while, when the journal is well established, decide whether your article gets published or doesn't get published in a respected by now journal, and something else, whether your article gets published in the next issue, or does it wait its turn to be published in 2 or 3 or 4 issues ahead. This is an editorial prerogative. In big journals, this is not only used for sinister purposes. I want to make sure there are some editorial prerogatives where very important discoveries and very important papers are pushed forward and published as the leading paper in a given issue. So the power of an editor of a successful journal and a successful area is enormous. Now, in choosing your editor, you primarily must choose an individual who understands that. If somebody doesn't understand that, forget it. You must look for someone who understands it. trying to teach an individual the advantages and the academic and scholarly powers and responsibility. I've been stressing the power, but there is also a question of responsibility to the community of scientists to present the right material at the right time, at the right sequence. I had an experience with an editor who proposed the journal to me. By the way, it is usually a 50-50 situation. Sometimes you, as the publisher, seeks out the numerical hydrodynamics. Sometimes the editor decides that it's time to start a new journal and will approach a publisher. Well, an editor approached me with a journal. We signed an agreement. We ran the journal for 3 years. He was paid handsomely, but he was greedy. And he decided that he was getting more material than he could possibly handle in this particular journal. He therefore started another journal with another publisher using a slightly different name. The case went to court, so I might as well tell you. The journal that we started was called and is called Journal of Toxicology and Environmental Health. The journal that the editor started with another publisher was called Journal of Environmental Pathology and Toxicology, which essentially is just a reversal of sequence of words, and if health is equivalent to pathology and the position of the word environmental is questioned, it's really identical journal. When we found out about the existence of the second journal, we decided that the editor has essentially committed or fallen into a conflict of interest situation. I'm telling you the story because you're mostly here from the Copyright Office, and I think it's interesting. And our reasoning was as follows. When the editor receives articles from the outside, he will have to make a decision whether it goes to Journal A or Journal B. And we didn't think that he can really make Solomonic decisions every time. He will, depending on where he had greater financial incentives. And we found out that he owned 50% of the other publication, whereas he was just on a salary and a small percentage of income with us. We fired him. When we fired him, we received a letter from the other publisher within a week or so of the dismissal saying, "We are now the publishers of your journal. You no longer publish it. Please send us all the subscription lists, all the money you have collected there for all the unpublished material, all the articles which you're holding in your manufacturing and editorial divisions. And if you don't do that, we'll send you to court." Of course, we said, "It's our journal." And they said, "Well, no, the journal is not yours. The journal belongs to the editor who gave it to us. And as a matter of fact, we now have enough papers that we are publishing the next issue within 4 weeks. Well, we went to court, and we got an injunction against the other publishing house, which is really a very rare, drastic measure that was awarded to us. And the lawsuit started. The questions that were being asked are as follows. Who owned the journal? Was it the editor who brought it to us, or was it the publishing house that has been publishing that journal for a period of 3 years by then? This is what the court has decided. Well, let me tell you that the editor felt that he owned the journal because it was his idea. The title was one that he concocted, and we are merely a printer and distributor of the material. The publisher's idea, position was, this is not so. Indeed, it was his idea, it was his title, but we have invested several $100,000 in promoting the journal, in printing the journal, in making it known, and making it an entity, and making it successful. Well, the judge said, who copyrighted the journal? In whose name was the journal copyrighted? Well, the journal was copyrighted in the name of the publisher. And the judge said, well, you also should have registered the name of the journal as a trademark in your name or in the editor's name to establish who really owns the title to the journal. Because a copyright essentially entitles you to protection by law of that particular issue. It does not establish ownership of the journal or entity as such. It all depends on the agreement between the individuals involved. For example, there are many small societies that cannot afford to go into publishing by themselves and let publishing organizations distribute and publish their journals in return for some monetary and financial returns. And still, the agreement says that the society owns the journal for either a period of time or whatever. Who owns the journal? Well, it all depends on, as I said, on the agreement that you have with your editor. It also depends on what you are saying on the very, very important copyright page. Since that case, which we have won, by the way, we are stating on each and every issue of each and every journal that we publish that this journal is owned and published by Hemisphere Publishing Corporation. This statement, hopefully we will not get involved in any more copyright suits. They are very expensive, prolonged, nerve-wracking, debilitating. This kind of statement is very important, and it should be included. Also, the fact that we call our journal by one name does not really prevent a publisher anywhere else in the world, unless we have trademarked that name, to start an identical journal with an identical name. As a matter of fact, there are several journals who are published under the same name. this is not good, and it's not good commercially, and there is competition, and publishers get subscription money from both. The subscription money crosses, their subscriptions go to us and our subscriptions go to them, so to say. But if the journals are both of these two journals are successful, it continues. But it's not illegal. I could probably start a Newsweek today. I know that they would clobber me in court, but there's nothing that legally prevents me to start a Newsweek magazine if the name Newsweek is not trademarked. Is that right?
Probably, except for unfair competition.
The answer was probably, but with the exception of unfair competition. So one, in publishing a new journal, must be very careful to define the relationship between the editor and the publishing house, or the organization in the publishing house, to determine who owns the journal. In doing some new journal publishing, we have used the unfortunate experience, and we have agreed how to disagree in case there is a disagreement between an organization that actually brought the journal to our attention and ourselves. We insist on keeping the name of the journal if we are to go our separate ways, because we feel that we have invested enough money into the journal. If we are to separate after, let's say, 10 years, and 10 years is the minimum contract that we will sign today for a journal from let's say a society that owns a journal, because we feel that fewer number of years will not bring enough return on our investment. Okay, we have started the journal, we have signed a contract, nobody's going to sue us, we own it, we have the proper copyright, we have the proper ownership statement, we have trademarked the title, and we have enough papers flowing into the house. We have to decide whether to make it a quarterly, a bi-monthly, a monthly, or bi-weekly, or whatever. There are obviously difficulties when you start a journal to start immediately a monthly. The most usual scholarly journal that started today is a quarterly of about 100 or 150 pages per issue. That means that the editor must scrounge around to get 150 pages, or I would say to 15 to 20 articles per issue. And that's a lot. Let's say that the editor, on the basis of our previous discussion, is a scrounger and he wields enough power in his community, and he does get the 20 pages every quarter, and we produce it on time. How long will it take us, and how will we go about selling this new journal of numerical hydrodynamics? Well, we have to develop a good financial plan. First of all, we must find out how many people are there who are interested in numerical hydrodynamics. And when we find out that there are possibly 5,000 people who are interested in the field, we'll immediately say that our total potential for a journal like that is no more than 10%. So we can hope to get 500 subscriptions. Well, after 500 subscriptions are reached, we are breaking even, and we are pricing our journal in such a way as to break even at 500 subscriptions. How long does it take us to reach it? Well, it can take us a year, it can take us 2, it can take us 3 years. After we've reached the break-even point, the field obviously has grown the way fields grow today, and the people in the field are no longer 5,000, but there may be 7 or 10,000 people if it's a dynamic field. What do we do to maximize our investment, which has been considerable? We are beginning to think of secondary products that I have described to you before. We are thinking of handbooks, we are thinking of textbooks, we are thinking of monographs, we are thinking of reprints, we are thinking of best of numerical hydrodynamics. There are new people coming into the field who have not been subscribing from Volume 1, Issue 1. And we are beginning to build a power base in numerical hydrodynamics. There may even be, as I mentioned before, a small society which has formed around it that may give their imprimatur, so to say, to the journal. They may say, published in association with, in return for giving some reduction to their members. Once you print a journal, the most expensive, or once you print anything, the most expensive item is the first issue. Once the first issue comes off the press, the printing of other 500 or 1,000 or 2,000 is not very expensive. The first issue is very expensive to print. By the way, you never in publishing print the right number of copies. You either print too many or you print too few. A friend of mine here in Washington, who used to be the publisher of the Washingtonian, used to tell a story about his employer, who was an encyclopedia publisher. And they published an encyclopedia that sold for $1.98 in the supermarket, you know, for Volume 1, and Volume 2 you pick up, looks fine. They sold 15 million copies of Volume 1, and on the basis of sales of Volume 1, decided to print 2 million copies of Volume 2 or Volume 3, whatever. And they thought it's a rational business decision to print 2 million copies on the basis of the sales of the previous volume. Well, it just didn't go. And he says that there is a big hole north of Albany, New York, where 2 million copies of Volume 2 of that encyclopedia are buried. Well, I usually compared my business to his business, and I say the size of the hole in which I have to bury the books and journals that we publish and print and don't sell is much, much smaller. And this is the difference between short-run publishing and large-run publishing. Where are we? Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
A minute or so ago, you mentioned the fact that societies sometimes bring up, could you explain the advantages for the society of the publishing?
The question is, if a society decides to use a publisher to publish their journal, what are the advantages for the society? Why wouldn't they publish by themselves? The advantages are size and experience. If the society does not have any publishing staff, it means that for the publication of one journal, they'd have to hire people to do the editing, to do the copy editing, to do the production, to do the liaison with the printer, to do the liaison with the authors and editors, to hire someone to do the fulfillment, etc., etc. If they go to a publishing house, which does have all these divisions, they can do it much cheaper. And it is essentially, in the long run, advantageous to the society to do nothing except lend their name. I hope the societies will forgive me for that statement. And to get some royalty at the end of the year. So this is essentially the advantage. It's the difference between efficiency of a large operation as the inefficiency and cost of a small operation. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that at some point the publisher can hopefully earn a living. What do you do to make certain that the author, without whom the journal cannot exist, also has the opportunity to make a living? That is, it's nice to have one's name and prestige in the journal, but you have that opportunity too as the publisher, have your name in there. But we find that that name and prestige will not pay the grocer or the mortgage maker. How much do you pay the author, and does that increase as you become more successful?
Okay, the question is, how severely does the publisher exploit the author? Was my resume proper? Okay, in speaking about scholarly journals, it has been the tradition that the author, and I'm not speaking about the editor right now, I'm speaking about the author who submits an article to a journal, is making a living, is earning a living by being a scientist, that he's getting paid by the government, by Westinghouse, by General Motors, or university. He, therefore, does not get paid for individual article that he or she produces. They get paid. It is part of their job to report the progress of their research or their findings. On the other hand, the editor, who has a direct job connected with the running of the journal, gets a fair share of royalties from the proceeds. The royalties usually start at some predetermined break-even point, let's say 500. Until you reach 500 subscribers, the publisher will merely reimburse the editor for running expenses and then pay him several $1,000s a year to sort of, quotation mark, compensate for his time or her time. Once the journal becomes successful and breaks even, then the publisher begins to share the income and pay royalties. In many cases, these royalties are substantial. And the editor becomes a true partner with the publisher.
Couldn't the person at the Xerox machine with the Betamax say the same thing? You're getting your money from the primary distribution. Why should I pay you extra? Why should you pay the author? Why should you pay the person at the Xerox machine?
The question is, shouldn't the Betamax operator or the Xerox machine operator say, you're getting your money from other sales, why should I pay you additional monies? Well, it is our property. That's a very simple answer. It is simply our property. As I told you before, in publishing, the cost is in producing the first issue or pressing the first record. But it belongs to someone, whether it belongs to the society, whether it belongs to the author, whether it belongs to the publisher. It is somebody's property, and somebody must get paid. When you go and buy a suit,
Not the author.
I beg your pardon?
Not the author.
In case of a book, yes. In the case of a journal, no.
A related question. What kind of arrangements are made with the author regarding the copyright? Do you have a contract normally in journal publishing where, I don't know, what is the nature of the contract with the author?
The question is, what is the nature of an agreement with a author of a journal article? The agreement is a copyright release. The author gives us a release of his copyright to the article and a permission to publish it in our journal. We also expect the author not to publish the article in another journal simultaneously. By having this release, we are on a legal footing to publish the article which is submitted to us. There is a special government employee release form that we use for people who do research and write their material on government time, in which case we still include the article in the journal. We copyright the issue as such, but we have no copyright to that specific article. Does that answer your question? By the way, it is a form that was developed by, I think, American Institute of Physics or Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, and most publishers in the scholarly and technical publishing field are using it. As a matter of fact, very frequently, if we have an empty page in a journal, we will run the release form so somebody who wants to publish an article in one of our journals can simply tear it out and submit it with his or her article. Any other questions? I could probably go on and on, but it's 5 to 12, and I think we might as well close right now. I'll be happy to answer any more questions. And we didn't cover many of the items here, but maybe next time. Thank you very much.